Australia's final Streamliner locomotives were produced between 1970 and 1972, entering service as the iconic CL class. In the early 1990s, rebuilds and renumbering split the original fleet of 17 locomotives into two groups, with 7 CLFs for freight-only duties and 10 CLPs suitably equipped for passenger services. Fast forward more than 30 years, and every remaining in-service CLP and CLF is back on freight. Of the survivors, 6 are owned by Horizon, with 4 working today's grain train, while the remaining 2 are currently undergoing overhaul, once again extending the working lives of these locomotives. We're currently located at Tailem Bend, 119 kilometres southeast of Adelaide on the edge of the Murray Mallee, where grain company Viterra has one of its largest grain sites in the state. Between the train and the port lies one of South Australia's toughest rail challenges, the Adelaide Hills. This steep and winding section of track includes 6 tunnels, ruling grades as steep as 1 in 44, and multiple tight 200 metre radius curves. Because of these demands, Horizon typically assigns more modern locomotives to these services, favouring AC traction and higher horsepower. But a decade ago, locomotive combinations like today's wouldn't have been unusual at all. These Streamliners were built for hard work and remain well adapted to the punishing railway ahead. After loading its 50 hopper consist, the crew begins the runaround manoeuvre, repositioning the locomotives for the return trip to Adelaide. This gives us a clear look at today's impressive lash-up. Leading the service is CLF 5, followed by another 1970s era workhorse, ALF 22 in second position. Behind them are 3 CLP locomotives of CLP 8, CLP 14 and CLP 16. Together they form a 5-unit consist, tasked with tackling the hills ahead. With the runaround complete, the train departs Tailem Bend Yard, pulling up briefly once clear. Departure from Tailem Bend's yard requires manual operation of the points, with a driver remaining behind to restore them after the train clears. The driver then walks the length of the consist, performing a final inspection before reboarding the locomotives. Reports of an opposing SCT freight in the hills suggests a cross at Callington, prompting a dash to Warla Bank to catch the grain before it enters the loop. However, on this occasion, train control had other ideas, with the cross instead arranged at Mount Barker Junction. A green approach signal confirms the plan as the grain train approaches. The train operated with the same locomotives 2 days in a row, with the second day's train seen at the famous Callington Curve spot, climbing the 1 in 44 grade. The service later failed at Petwood, with locomotives from Adelaide sent out to assist, bringing this vintage locomotive Lashup to an end. Back to the first day's train at Nairne, where a flat-out assault of the steep grade from Petwood is nearly complete. This section features nearly 10 kilometres of continuous 1 in 45 climbing, from east of Petwood through to the western side of Nairne, and requires constant full power for a successful climb. One final push for the locomotives and crew remains towards the summit of the line, 492 metres above sea level at Mount Lofty. Seen at the eastern end of the loop, all 5 engines continue to work in unison, failure free for today, hauling the fully loaded 50 hopper service towards the peak around the next bend. With the summit behind them, the train begins its descent into Adelaide. At Adelaide Hills Tunnel, the locomotives carefully control the heavy consist using dynamic braking on the 1 in 50 downhill grade, bringing this impressive Adelaide Hills crossing to a close. More than half a century after they were built, Australia's Streamliners continue to prove their worth, still climbing, still hauling, and still earning their place on the main line. Thanks for watching, and see you next time for more train action.